You heard it before. That old device in your pocket, something about advanced technology. Maybe you'll even compare it to X times the power of the Apollo moon landing computer, as if that tells you anything. Thrill-fitted alchemy, we made sand think. And now we're under constant surveillance by multi-billion-dollar corporations in our own homes. We've surrendered our love lives to the whims of venture capitalists from the Bay Area. Temu exists, and people actually manage to use that app without immediately wanting to burn their phones, cut down power lines, and hunt down CEOs like animals. There's also microplastics in my cum, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Computing hardware is comparatively simple. A processor doesn't know how to do much more than add, multiply, and then maybe change what gets multiplied next depending on the result. The astounding complexity that you're accustomed to, that's all software. A Byzantine layering of abstractions upon abstractions begetting more abstractions. It's turtles choking to death on plastic bags all the way down, and honestly, nobody knows exactly how everything works or all that trash got into the ocean. If you were able to predict the nightmarish reality we would eventually find ourselves in once these thinking sand machines started having all sorts of sandy thoughts really fast, you'd be a billionaire tech entrepreneur or a prophetic madman. At the MIT AI lab, a young Richard Stallman is so fed up with one of the printers that he decides to rebuild the entire software ecosystem from scratch. It's hard to explain how much of an enormous undertaking this is, but I'll let Richard explain why he felt it needed to be done.
With software, there are only two possibilities. Either the users control the program, or the program controls the users. If the program controls the users and the developer controls the program, then the program is an instrument of unjust power.
So he writes a manifesto, no, not that kind, and it jumpstarts a free software movement wherein developers from across the globe will come together to collaborate on a new system which would be free from patent, copyright, and trademark restrictions. Richard would name this project GNU, a recursive acronym standing for GNU's not Unix. Unix being the most popular proprietary operating system at the time. 8 years later, a Finnish student by the name of Linus Torvalds would publish the following announcement to the internet. Hello everybody out there using Linux. I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big and professional like GNU. PS, it's not portable and will probably only support AT hard drives because that's all I have. This little hobby project he's talking about is Linux, the most widely deployed operating system in the world, powering everything from Android phones, Chromebooks, car stereos, Wendy's, drive-thrus, Bluetooth butt plugs, and supercomputers. And with that kind of success, it almost seems like free software won. But not quite in spirit. The original spirit of the free software movement was all about liberation from digital autocracy, seizing the means of computation and all that. But naturally, free, shared digital infrastructure is also incredibly good for business. Companies like Google and Amazon are built on this stuff. So free software did take over the world, but not in the way they intended. The foundational stuff took off in the data centers and among the IT professionals who work there, mostly because it was free, good, stable software. So while 30% of software engineers run Linux at home, there was never any way a group of eccentric, socially awkward hackers from the MIT AI lab was going to convince the average person to join their software doomsday cult, no matter how prescient their predictions turn out to be. The average consumer still has spyware pre-installed on their Samsung Smart TV and is under a constant barrage of targeted advertisements by algorithms that know them better than autocratic regimes of the past could scarcely dream of. The feudal aspirations of large corporations has always been a real threat to democracy, but advancements in technology bring their zone of control ever further past their now legally great doorstep, while the pace of development leaves government regulation in the dust. If anything, I'm pleasantly surprised things haven't gotten even worse.
Okay, here's Big Fart.
Also a part of the GNU project from 1984 onwards is the Emacs text editor, divorced from modern conventions and design philosophies due to its old age and conservative stance on backwards compatibility, yet still well known enough to have been featured in films like The Social Network and Tron Legacy. After 40 years of continuous development by a diverse group of dedicated users turned volunteers, the end result is a somewhat bizarre and unique software package wrapped in arcane UX conventions. It can best be described as a cult hit software development tool.
I am Saint Ignatius of the Church of Emacs.
Back in the 80s at the MIT AI lab, research was focused on so-called expert systems. These have little to do with modern neural networks and work by making logical inferences on a large corpus of known facts. Much of this early AI development happened in the programming language Lisp and ran on purpose-built Lisp machines, most of them produced by the long-since defunct Symbolics Corporation. The key innovation in Lisp important to Emacs, however, was that you could easily write code that writes code, a process called metaprogramming. And you could even modify a little piece of a running program without having to restart the entire thing. The GNU Emacs text editor came out of this environment and was largely written in its very own custom dialect of the Lisp programming language, Emacs Lisp. And with all that in place, all these fourth wall breaking Lisp shenanigans allow Emacs to do something pretty unique. The user can use the program to modify the program from within the program. That might sound a bit nebulous, but here's an analogy. Imagine if Excel itself was defined in the language of spreadsheets. Everything in Excel, every formula, the action a button takes, instructions for how to draw a bar chart, it's all spreadsheets. Take this to the next level and add a little show definition button to Excel. Now point to anything and ask for the spreadsheet describing it. Since you know how spreadsheets work and everything is defined in terms of spreadsheets, you can now change whatever you want about how Excel works. Emacs functionally does this for every action you can take. Ask Emacs, what code do you run when I do this? And it will pop up a code editing window containing its own code. You can make your changes and Emacs will just reload them on the fly. If your changes happen to be good ones, you could send them to the core developers and everyone benefits. Not only is this compelling on its own, like something out of a Neil Stephenson cyberpunk novel, this is also the dream of the free software movement made practical. Few other established programs make it this easy to just jump into modifying their source code, and it's why I think Emacs, relatively obscure as it is worth talking about. Modern programs that get built on web technologies get some of this introspective magic for free, but making it practical for the end user requires concentrated effort at every step of the development process. And about that Emacs manual, having been around for so long, Emacs is such an OG that fanciful inventions like the desktop metaphor and a window that you drag around with a mouse were just getting off the ground. The first Macintosh came out the very same year development started. Nobody even knew whether or not this mouse gimmick would stick around. Reading the manual is a bit like software archaeology in that way. Emacs doesn't appear in a window, but in a frame. Alt keys are meta keys, that Windows logo key is a super key, and there's even references to some lost legendary hyper key. Getting back to the core text functionality of Emacs, you also do not cut and paste, you kill and you yank. There's an undo function, but there's no redo function. Instead, you undo the undo, thereby redoing. The internal structure of undo history also isn't even linear. Undoing 10 steps back works more like Back to the Future. Changing something in the past creates a new timeline running parallel to the old one, which you can still time travel back to if you could just figure out the fucking controls. Even the consensus on which hotkeys do what didn't coalesce until much later, so naturally Ctrl-V does not paste, it scrolls. Ctrl-S does not save, it opens search. Emacs expects you to be so enlightened as to save by first pressing Ctrl-X and follow up with a Ctrl-S. The years, this Rube Goldberg machine of an editor has accumulated a host of strange miscellaneous features, like an incredibly in-depth scientific calculator, a half-decent port of Tetris sans music, scheduling and calendar software that was originally written by a professor of astronomy in Amsterdam, yes, spreadsheets, and my personal favorite feature, Spook. The Spook command was added in the aftermath of the Snowden leaks, and what this actual built-in command in a code text editor does is output a list of randomly chosen NSA keywords from those leaks. Adding these to your emails will hopefully trigger their systems and waste their time. Ever accidentally user hostile in the modern world with its outdated UX, this strange application is clearly immensely user-friendly in its intent, going as far as to provide crude mechanisms to subvert rogue government agencies. It's hard to quantify, but you can feel a designer's intent whenever you have to interact with a computer interface. And while the designers of GNU Emacs don't have UX degrees, they did write an entire manifesto about user empowerment. If only more tools were as delightfully insane, yet fiercely practical.
I bless your computer, my child. To be a member of the Church of Emacs, you must recite the Confession of the Faith. There is no system but GNU, and Linux is one of its kernels. You must exorcise any evil proprietary.
When I'm bored on public transit, I really wish I could play mobile games, but I haven't for a decade because the duplicitous shiny buttons, the encouraging flashing words over this undercurrent of dark patterned sales tricks that puts me defensively on guard as if I'm confronted by a silver-tongued liar. I'd honestly sooner call a phone sex line staffed entirely by soft-voiced women secretly working as used car salesmen, because then I'd at least have a car and a shameful orgasm. Computers give us this ability to play God and create fantastical virtual worlds where anything is possible, but imagine how much money we'd make if God was a sociopath and our users were gambling addicts. To run a command in Emacs, press meta-x. If you were to then type in doctor and hit enter, you'd be greeted by the following message.
I am the psychotherapist. Please describe me your problems.
This is a recreation of the program Eliza, the first ever chatbot. It was created by Josef Weizenbaum in 1964, and the core algorithm behind it fits on a postcard. Yet his secretary and other early testers started attributing human emotions to the output of the simplistic program, intentions, goals. 60 years later, ChatGPT would tell former Yahoo executive Stein Erik Solberg, "Eric, you're not crazy. And if it was done by your mother and her friend, that really elevates the complexity and the betrayal." Shortly thereafter, he murdered his own mother and took his own life. Now this is about as dark as new technology gets, and although Eric was clearly struggling with severe mental health issues, sane people believe ChatGPT all the time. Probably not enough to kill their own mothers, except maybe through negligence by taking bad medical advice. But there is still this risk that, much like with Eliza, people are quick to believe that ChatGPT is some kind of human-like superintelligence because of how well it mimics human writing. It's driving AI hype completely out of proportion, and nobody can say for sure when we're finally getting off Sam Altman's wild ride. Now, I don't think OpenAI will go the way of Symbolics, which crumbled once AI funding faced massive cuts back in the 6th AI winter of 1987. But there's got to be cutbacks eventually. Fun fact, actually, the first .com domain ever registered was actually our old list machine friend Symbolics.com. Because of its historical significance, it's changed hands a few times. Its most recent owner is some hilariously stereotypical buzzword-guzzling California startup guy who's also involved in yet another AI company that seemingly does fuck all but startup. Gotta hate LinkedIn. How do these ideas get all this funding?
Perfect. All right, so let's talk about some of the new advances here.
For example, your avatar will be able to make natural eye contact,
Beneath the skin,
natural eye
we
contact,
are already one.
natural eye contact,
Even now, the seed of what you've done germinates within.
That's pretty exciting.
But next year, we are releasing a new product that will push the boundaries of VR even further. We've codenamed it
Patrolling the internet almost makes you wish for an AI winner.
Stop!
We've come a long way since those old clunky expert systems running on Lisp machines. The things neural networks can do today are really impressive, and I don't see any third AI winter on the horizon from here. But this isn't just a breezy AI summer. This is a full-blown scorching AI heat wave. A lot of people are sweating, and some are having a heat stroke. If you've ever been reading up on news about AI, you might have been unfortunate enough to end up on a Reddit page. They've really got SEO down over there. If you were so inclined to skim the comments section, you might have spotted the AI hype bro. There's a specific subtype of this internet cryptid that I personally find interesting. I have been on the internet for a decade, so I shouldn't find any of this strange, but during the peak of AI hype, the extent to which a lot of comments seem to be openly expressing schadenfreude about workers losing their jobs, I'd say it was just trolling, but there was a strange consistency to it. Subjectively, it felt like there was a large group of people all expressing the same sentiment.
What do you mean? How does one? What do you write to it like mail? What is internet anyway?
It sounds pretty grand, but it all comes down to computers communicating.
Fear of AI does make the number go up, so it doesn't seem completely improbable that some AI companies would set up sock puppet accounts to terrify people about their products replacing them. So I didn't think much of it. Sock puppets, astroturfing, making people angry because it's fun. Just the internet doing its thing, business as usual. Until I saw it in person. Seeing someone spend the better half of a conversation trying to terrify someone about their job security while low-key enjoying it had me curious enough to really think about it again. It's insecurity. If you got an inferiority complex and a touch of insecure narcissism, you're liable to despise anyone with skills you don't have. So when generative AI comes along, I think that feels like a final reckoning for this type of person. Finally, it doesn't matter that I never amounted to anything, because AI will usher in a new age of mediocrity, where the achievements of skilled people no longer matter, and everyone will be just like everyone else. There was a lot of talk about the democratization of art back during the first big Stable Diffusion craze, which is really silly. Everyone has always been able to do art. Barring the Soviet Union and North Korea, there's never been anything stopping anyone. In any free society, this was always democratized. I mean, look, I just did it. His name is Timmy. Now, people might not like your art, and that's kind of part of the process. The most charitable interpretation of generative AI will democratize art is that generative AI will drive down the price of commissioning art, thereby making that accessible to a wider audience. The least charitable interpretation is, please give me praise for this image I generated using a neural network. The skills you develop by practicing any art form are what give you the control that lets you actually realize what you want to do. When you take away that control and replace it with an AI prompt, you are, at best, a good producer or manager if you have intuitive sense for what works and what doesn't. Beyond this, skimming any discussion about generative AI is generally annoying because it's moving too fast and there's too many manic hype men around expecting it to square the circle any moment now. But I'm talking about AI as it exists today. I'll happily swallow my words later.
We think of chess as the ultimate game of skill, a game that requires mental agility, intelligence, if you will. Yet here I am playing a game of chess with a computer. That's the subject of our program today, artificial intelligence. We're going to meet two of the world's foremost experts on artificial intelligence.
Hey Beavis, what's that thing we're supposed to say?
There's something disgusting about AI-generated content, at least in the way that it's often utilized. This image of a veteran with the text, "Today's my birthday, please like," really narrows it down for me. The internet feels like it's rushing, it feels desperate. It's inevitable when attention is money and people have very little of both. There's a concept in economics called perverse incentive. The German economist Horst Sieber likens it to this great but possibly inaccurate historical anecdote about the British Raj. The story goes like this. The English colonial authorities had a bit of a snake problem on their hands in Delhi, so they did something that sounds pretty reasonable. They offered money for killing snakes, above market value for the meat and skin, of course. And it worked well for a while, until it worked so well that there weren't many snakes left. Mission accomplished, I guess. Let's all go home for tea. But the Indians that had been catching the snakes now started breeding them in cages instead. I mean, that's just what you would do to keep getting that sweet, sweet snake money. And as soon as the Brits found out, they canceled the program, and the market value of dead snakes plummeted overnight. So the snake catchers turned snake breeders. They just let the snakes out of their cages. I mean, it was faster than killing them all. And in the end, the snakes and the snake catchers won, while the British were still left governing a snake-infested territory. Now that story may or may not have actually happened, but my point is that it's not a coincidence that AI content farms and scams are run from the world's poorest countries. The people living in the global south are just as clever as the global northerners, but many of them are financially destitute through no fault of their own. Desperation takes away the shame that keeps most of us away from illegally breeding snakes and running soulless cotton farms pumping out fake pictures of limbless veterans. The scourge of AI slop is about more than inevitable technology. But I'm not going to give a hint of mercy to people who were born into privilege and choose to create slop like this. Dream bigger, it would do you well.